The blizzard hit so suddenly that Quinn Xavier barely had time to turn his horse toward higher ground before the white wall of snow swallowed everything in sight. It was November 1884 in the Colorado Territory, and he had been riding through the mountains near Coolidge when the storm caught him unprepared. His gelding stumbled through drifts that grew deeper with each passing minute, and Quinn knew with grim certainty that if he didn't find shelter soon, they would both freeze to death before nightfall. Through the howling wind, he spotted a dark shape against the white landscape. A cabin, small and sturdy, with smoke rising from its chimney. Quinn urged his horse forward, fighting against the cold that had already numbed his fingers inside his gloves. By the time he reached the cabin's door, he could barely feel his legs as he dismounted. He pounded on the rough wooden planks with what strength remained in his frozen hands. The door opened a crack, and a woman's face appeared, her green eyes widening at the sight of him covered in snow and ice. "Please," Quinn managed through chattering teeth. "Storm caught me. Need shelter." She hesitated only a moment before pulling the door wider. "Get inside. Quickly." Quinn stumbled into the warmth, his horse following behind him into the small front room that apparently served as both entrance and stable area during harsh weather. The woman shut the door firmly against the wind, then turned to study him with a mixture of concern and wariness. "You'll freeze if you don't get those wet clothes off," she said, her voice carrying a soft strength. "There's a privacy screen in the corner. I'll get blankets." As Quinn's eyes adjusted to the dim light, he took in his surroundings. The cabin was simple but well-maintained, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. A door led to what he assumed was the main living area. Everything spoke of careful attention and hard work, despite limited means. The woman returned with heavy wool blankets and a set of men's clothes that had clearly seen better days. "These were my husband's," she said quietly. "He won't be needing them anymore." Quinn nodded his understanding, too cold to offer condolences yet. He moved behind the screen and peeled off his frozen layers with fingers that barely cooperated. When he emerged wrapped in blankets, the woman had already unsaddled his horse and was rubbing the animal down with practiced efficiency. "I'm Quinn Xavier," he said, finally able to speak properly. "I'm grateful for your help. I know it's not proper for a lady to be alone with a stranger." She glanced at him, still wary but less guarded now. "Naomi Vance, and propriety matters less than survival out here. That storm's going to last at least 2 days by the look of it." 2 days. Quinn moved closer to the fire, holding his hands toward the warmth. "Maybe 3. Naomi finished with the horse and hung the saddle on a peg near the door. "I've lived through enough Colorado winters to recognize a bad one. You're lucky you found this place when you did." Quinn studied her more closely now that the immediate crisis had passed. She was perhaps 26 or 27 years old, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical bun, and a face that would have been beautiful if not for the deep sadness that lingered in her eyes. She wore a simple gray dress covered by a worn apron, and she moved with the confident capability of someone accustomed to hard work. "How long have you been widowed?" he asked, then immediately regretted the personal question. "I'm sorry, that's none of my business." Naomi's hand stilled on the horse's flank. 6 months. He died last May when his horse threw him during a cattle drive, broke his neck. Her voice was matter-of-fact, but Quinn heard the pain underneath. "I'm 27. We were married for 4 years. "I'm 29, Quinn offered, feeling the need to share something of himself in return. "Never married. Been working ranches since I was 15, saving money to start my own spread someday." "Is that why you're in these mountains in November?" Naomi moved toward the inner door. "Come inside where it's warmer. That fire out here is just for the animals." Quinn followed her into the main room, which was considerably cozier. A larger fireplace crackled with a healthy blaze, and the space contained a bed in one corner, a small kitchen area with a cookstove, a rough table with 2 chairs, and a rocking chair near the hearth. It was humble but clean, with touches that spoke of a woman's care. Dried herbs hung from the rafters, and colorful rag rugs covered the wooden floor. "I was scouting land," Quinn explained, settling into one of the wooden chairs. "There's a ranch for sale north of here, and the owner said I could look it over before making an offer." I didn't expect the weather to turn so fast. Naomi moved to the stove and lifted the lid on a pot that released the savory aroma of stew. "This is Colorado. Weather turns on a breath. You should have known better than to go out alone this late in the season." "You're right," Quinn admitted. "I was foolish, but I've been working toward owning land for so long that when the opportunity came, I jumped at it without thinking it through properly." She ladled stew into 2 tin bowls and set one before him along with a chunk of dark bread. "Eat. You need to get your strength back." The food was simple but good, and Quinn realized he was ravenous. They ate in silence for a while, the wind howling outside and rattling the shutters. The cabin felt like a small island of warmth and safety in a hostile white world. "This is excellent," Quinn said finally. "Thank you." Naomi nodded, breaking off a piece of bread. "My mother taught me to cook before she died. Said a woman needed to know how to make a good meal from whatever she had on hand." "She taught you well." Quinn paused, then asked carefully, "How are you managing out here alone? This seems like a difficult place for anyone to survive, let alone a woman on her own." Her green eyes flashed with something between pride and defiance. "I manage just fine. I have chickens for eggs, a cow for milk, and a good vegetable garden in summer. I hunt rabbits and grouse when I can. My husband left me the cabin free and clear, and I'm not about to abandon it just because some people think a woman can't make it alone." "I didn't mean to suggest you couldn't," Quinn said quickly. "I just meant it must be hard work." Naomi's expression softened slightly. "It is. But I'd rather work hard on my own land than be dependent on anyone else. My husband's family wanted me to move in with them after he died, but they would have expected me to be grateful for their charity. This way, I answer to no one." Quinn heard the fierce independence in her voice and respected it. "I understand. I've been working for other people my whole adult life, always at someone else's beck and call. That's why I want my own place." The storm intensified as darkness fell, the wind screaming around the cabin's corners. Naomi brought out more blankets and made up a pallet on the floor near the fire. "You'll sleep here," she said. "It's warm and proper enough with you on the floor and me in my bed." "I'm grateful," Quinn said sincerely. "You're saving my life by taking me in." "Anyone would do the same," Naomi replied, but her tone suggested she wasn't entirely convinced of that. That night, Quinn lay awake listening to the storm and the soft sound of Naomi's breathing from the bed across the room. He thought about the path that had brought him here, to this small cabin in the mountains. He had been born in Kansas to a family of farmers who lost everything when he was 14. His father had died of fever, and his mother had followed 6 months later, leaving Quinn and his younger sister orphans. His sister had been taken in by their aunt, but Quinn had struck out on his own, too proud to accept charity even then. He had worked cattle drives, served as a ranch hand, and even spent a year as a deputy in a small Texas town. Every cent he could spare had gone into a savings account at the bank in Denver. Now, at 29, he finally had enough to make an offer on the ranch he had been scouting. It was modest, only a few hundred acres, but it would be his. The next morning, Quinn woke to the smell of coffee and frying bacon. The storm still raged outside, perhaps even worse than the night before. Naomi was already dressed and working at the stove, her movements efficient and practiced. "Good morning," she said without turning around. "I hope you slept well enough." "Better than I had any right to expect," Quinn replied, sitting up and folding the blankets neatly. "That smells wonderful." They ate breakfast together, and Quinn found himself studying Naomi in the morning light. She had a quiet beauty that was easy to overlook at first, but the more he watched her, the more he noticed. The graceful way she moved, the intelligence in her eyes, the determined set of her jaw. She was stronger than she looked, he realized. She would have to be to survive out here alone. "Tell me about your husband," Quinn said as they finished eating. "If you don't mind talking about him." Naomi was quiet for a long moment, her fingers wrapped around her coffee cup. "Daniel was a good man. We met in Coolidge when I was working at the general store. He was older than me by 8 years, already established with this cabin and some land. He courted me properly, and we married when I was 23. He was kind and hardworking, but we never had children despite wanting them." "I'm sorry," Quinn said softly. "Daniel always said it would happen when the time was right, but then he died, and I realized the time would never come." She looked up, meeting Quinn's eyes. "I loved him, but it wasn't the kind of love you read about in books. It was comfortable and safe. Sometimes I wonder if that's all love really is in the end." Quinn considered this. "I've never been in love, so I can't say, but I hope it's more than just comfortable and safe. I hope it's something that makes you feel alive." "Maybe that's just romance novels filling your head with nonsense," Naomi said, but there was a wistfulness in her voice that suggested she wanted to believe otherwise. The day passed slowly, the storm showing no signs of letting up. Quinn helped Naomi with chores around the cabin, carrying water from the covered well just outside the door, splitting wood for the fire, and tending to the animals. They fell into an easy working rhythm, each anticipating what needed to be done and doing it without much discussion. In the afternoon, Naomi brought out a basket of mending and settled in the rocking chair. Quinn sat at the table, working on repairing a broken bridle from the stable area. They talked as they worked, sharing stories of their lives and dreams. "I had a sister," Quinn said, threading leather through a hole he had just punched. "Mary. She was 3 years younger than me. When our parents died, she went to live with our aunt in Missouri. I haven't seen her in 15 years, though we write sometimes. She's married now with 4 children." "Do you miss her?" Naomi asked, her needle flashing in and out of a torn shirt. "Every day. But I send her money when I can, and she writes me about her children. It's not the same as being there, but it's something." Quinn paused in his work. "What about you? Do you have family?" "A brother in Denver. He's a banker, very respectable. He wrote after Daniel died, offering to help me find a position as a governess or companion to some wealthy family. He doesn't understand why I'd want to stay here." Naomi tied off a thread and examined her work. "But this is my home. Daniel and I built a life here, and I'm not ready to give that up." As the second day of the storm wore on, Quinn found himself increasingly aware of Naomi's presence. The way she hummed softly while she worked, the smile that occasionally broke through her serious expression, the strength in her hands as she kneaded bread dough for their supper. He had been around many women in his life, but none had affected him quite this way. There was something about her combination of vulnerability and strength that drew him in. That evening, after another simple but satisfying meal, they sat by the fire and Naomi pulled out a worn book. "Do you read?" she asked. "Some. I went to school through 6th grade before my parents died. I can read and cipher well enough. I have several books that Daniel and I collected over the years. This one's a collection of poetry. Would you like me to read some aloud?" Quinn nodded, settling back in his chair. Naomi's voice was soft and melodious as she read, bringing the words to life in the firelit room. Quinn watched her face as she read, seeing the way her expression changed with the different poems, revealing emotions she normally kept hidden. When she finished, she closed the book and looked at him. "You're staring." "I'm sorry," Quinn said, feeling heat rise to his face. "It's just that you're different than I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone harder, maybe, more brittle. You've been through a lot, but you haven't let it make you cold." Naomi set the book aside carefully. "Some days I feel very cold indeed. Some days I wonder what the point of going on is when everything I planned for is gone. But then I wake up the next morning, and the chickens need feeding and the cow needs milking, and life just continues whether you're ready for it or not." "That's true enough," Quinn agreed. "After my parents died, I kept thinking I would wake up one day and it would all have been a bad dream. But it never was, and eventually you just have to accept that and move forward." The storm finally broke on the third day, leaving the world outside buried under 3 feet of fresh snow. Quinn woke early and looked out the small window to see a landscape transformed into a brilliant white wonderland under a clear blue sky. "It's beautiful," Naomi said, coming to stand beside him. She was so close he could smell the lavender soap she used, and Quinn had to resist the urge to put his arm around her shoulders. "Beautiful and deadly," he said instead. "I need to head back to Coolidge, but I'm going to have to wait at least another day for the snow to settle and the roads to become passable." "You should wait longer than that," Naomi said, moving away to start breakfast. "Another storm could come through and you'd be caught out in the open again." "I can't impose on your hospitality indefinitely." "It's not an imposition." She cracked eggs into a pan, not looking at him. "I've enjoyed having someone to talk to. It gets lonely out here by myself." Quinn felt his heart lift at her words. "I've enjoyed it too, more than I expected." They spent that day together in companionable silence and easy conversation, doing the work that needed doing but also taking time to simply be in each other's presence. Quinn found himself noticing little things about Naomi, the way she tucked a stray hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the small scar on her left hand from a childhood accident, the way her laugh transformed her face when something genuinely amused her. By evening, Quinn knew he was in trouble. He had known Naomi for only 3 days, but he felt more for her than he had felt for any woman in his life. It was more than attraction, though he certainly found her beautiful. It was a connection, a sense that she understood him in ways others never had. "I should go tomorrow," he said as they sat by the fire after supper. "The weather looks like it will hold, and I've already taken too much of your kindness." Naomi was quiet for a long moment, staring into the flames. "What will you do about the ranch?" "I'll ride up there once the snow melts a bit more. It's not going anywhere, and the owner said I had until January to make my decision." "You could stay here a few more days," Naomi said softly. "Rest your horse. Make sure you're fully recovered from the cold. It would be the sensible thing to do." Quinn looked at her, trying to read her expression in the flickering firelight. "Is that what you want? For me to stay?" She finally met his eyes, and he saw conflict there. "I don't know what I want. You're the first person besides the occasional traveler who's been here since Daniel died. Having you here has made me remember what it's like to not be alone all the time, but I'm also frightened of what it means that I don't want you to leave." "Naomi," Quinn said gently, moving to kneel beside her chair. "I feel the same way. These past 3 days have been some of the best of my life, and that seems impossible given that we're virtual strangers. But there's something between us. You must feel it too." "I do," she whispered. "But it's too soon. Daniel's only been gone 6 months. What would people think?" "I don't care what people think," Quinn said fiercely. "Do you?" Naomi looked down at her hands, twisted together in her lap. "I don't know. I loved Daniel Quinn. Maybe not the way I always dreamed of loving someone, but I was a good wife to him. I honored my vows. It feels wrong to have these feelings so soon after his death. Quinn took her hands in his, feeling their warmth. Daniel would want you to be happy. Any man who loved you would want that. How can you know what he would want? You never met him. Because I can't imagine truly loving someone and wanting them to spend the rest of their life alone and grieving. Quinn squeezed her hands gently. And because in just 3 days, I've come to care for you enough that I know I would want you to find happiness if something happened to me. Naomi's eyes filled with tears. This is happening too fast. You're going to leave tomorrow and I'll never see you again, and this will all just be a strange dream brought on by a snowstorm. It doesn't have to be that way, Quinn said. I could come back after I've looked at the ranch. I could visit you properly this time. We could get to know each other better and see where this leads. And if people talk, a widow being courted just 6 months after her husband's death, let them talk. What matters is what we feel and what we want. Quinn reached up to gently wipe away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. Naomi, I don't know what this is between us, but I know it's real. I know I want to explore it and see if it could grow into something lasting. She leaned into his touch, closing her eyes. I want that too. God help me, I want that too. Quinn left the next morning, but not before they had talked long into the night about what would happen next. He would ride to Coolidge, check on the ranch when the weather permitted, and return to visit Naomi within 2 weeks. They would court properly, giving themselves time to be sure of their feelings despite the powerful attraction that had sprung up between them. As Quinn rode away, he looked back to see Naomi standing in the doorway of the cabin, her shawl wrapped tight against the cold. She raised her hand in farewell, and he felt his heart constrict with longing. 2 weeks suddenly seemed like an eternity. The ride to Coolidge took most of the day, the snow making travel slow and difficult. When Quinn finally reached the small town nestled in the mountain valley, he went straight to the hotel and took a room. The next morning, he sent word to the ranch owner that he was still interested in viewing the property. 5 days later, Quinn rode out to see the ranch. It was everything he had hoped for and more. The land was good, the building solid if in need of some repair, and the price was fair. The owner, an aging rancher named Harold Thompson, wanted to move to California to live with his daughter and was motivated to sell. I can give you a month to come up with the money, Thompson said as they stood in the ranch house looking out at the snow-covered pastures. After that, I've got another buyer interested. I have the money, Quinn said, but I need to think about something before I commit. Thompson raised an eyebrow. A ranch like this won't wait forever. I understand. Give me a week. Quinn returned to town and spent the next 2 days thinking hard about his future. He had the money to buy the ranch, but it would take everything he had saved. He would be starting from scratch, with just enough left over to buy a small herd and supplies to get through the winter. It was what he had always wanted, the dream he had worked toward for 15 years. But now, there was Naomi. The idea that had been forming in the back of his mind since he left her cabin finally crystallized into a real possibility. He could buy the ranch, yes. But what if he didn't do it alone? What if he proposed to Naomi and they started this new life together? It was crazy. They had known each other for only 3 days. People would say he was mad, that she was taking advantage of a widow's vulnerability, that they were rushing into disaster. But Quinn had spent his whole life being practical and cautious, and where had it gotten him? At 29, he was still alone, still working for other people's dreams. Maybe it was time to take a chance on something that felt right, even if it seemed impossible. He rode out to Naomi's cabin on the 14th day after he had left, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and terror. What if she had changed her mind? What if the connection they had felt was just the forced intimacy of being snowbound together? But when Naomi opened the door and saw him standing there, her face lit up with such joy that all Quinn's doubts vanished. She flew into his arms without hesitation, and he caught her and held her close, breathing in the scent of lavender and feeling like he had finally come home. "I thought you might not come back," she said against his chest. "I told you I would. I always keep my promises." Quinn pulled back to look at her face. "Can we talk? I have something important to discuss with you." They went inside, and Quinn noticed that the cabin looked brighter somehow, more welcoming. Naomi had clearly been working hard in his absence, cleaning and organizing. She poured coffee and they sat at the table, the winter sunlight streaming through the window. "I saw the ranch," Quinn said. "It's perfect, everything I could want." "That's wonderful," Naomi said, but he heard the sadness underneath her words. "I want to buy it, but I want to do something that might seem crazy." Quinn reached across the table and took her hand. "I want you to marry me, Naomi. I want us to buy that ranch together and build a life there. I know it's too soon and I know people will talk, but I also know that what I feel for you is real and true. I'm in love with you." Naomi stared at him, her green eyes wide with shock. "Quinn, we barely know each other." "I know. But I also know that I've never felt this way about anyone before. I know that every moment away from you has felt like a piece of me was missing. I know that when I think about the future, I can't imagine it without you in it." He squeezed her hand. "I'm not asking you to decide right now. Think about it. Take whatever time you need, but I wanted you to know how I feel and what I want." Tears streamed down Naomi's face. "I love you too. I've been trying not to, trying to convince myself it was just gratitude or loneliness, but it's not. It's real." She took a shaky breath. "But I'm scared, Quinn. My marriage to Daniel was safe and predictable. This feels wild and dangerous, like I'm standing on the edge of a cliff. I know. I'm scared too." Quinn brought her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "But I'd rather risk falling than spend the rest of my life wondering what might have been." They talked for hours, laying out all their fears and hopes, discussing the practical realities of what Quinn was proposing. The ranch would need a lot of work. They would have to pool their resources. Naomi would have to sell her cabin or rent it out. They would be starting a new life together with barely any money and winter closing in. "People will say terrible things," Naomi warned. "They'll say I didn't love Daniel, that I'm being disrespectful to his memory. They'll say you're taking advantage of a vulnerable widow. Let them say what they want, we'll know the truth." Quinn stood and pulled Naomi to her feet. "Marry me, not today or next week, but soon, before Christmas. We'll start the new year as husband and wife, building our life together on that ranch." Naomi looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. Whatever she saw there must have convinced her, because she smiled through her tears and nodded. "Yes, yes, I'll marry you." Quinn kissed her then, a gentle kiss that promised everything and asked for nothing. When they pulled apart, both were trembling. "I should do this properly," Quinn said. He knelt down on one knee, still holding her hand. "Naomi Vance, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" "Yes," she said again, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes, Quinn Xavier, I will marry you." They decided to marry in 3 weeks, which would give them time to make the necessary arrangements. Quinn returned to Coolidge and put down earnest money on the ranch, telling Thompson he would have the full amount by the end of December. He also spoke to the preacher at the small church, arranging for a simple ceremony. The news spread quickly through the town, as Quinn had known it would. He endured the stares and whispers, the disapproving looks from older women and the knowing smirks from some of the men. But he kept his head high, refusing to act ashamed of something that felt so right. Naomi faced worse. When word reached the women's auxiliary at the church, several of them made the trek out to her cabin to express their concerns. Quinn was there when they arrived, and he stood beside Naomi as she faced them down. "It's unseemly," said Mrs. Martha Patterson, the banker's wife and the unofficial leader of Coolidge society. "Daniel has been gone less than a year. This reflects poorly on you and on his memory." "My husband is dead," Naomi said quietly but firmly. "I mourned him properly and I loved him faithfully while he lived. But I'm still alive, and I have a right to find happiness again. But with a drifter, a cowboy with no prospects." Mrs. Patterson's voice dripped with disdain. "I'm buying the Thompson Ranch," Quinn interjected. "I have the money saved and I'm making an honest life for myself and my future wife." "Still, the haste is improper. People will think people can think whatever they like," Naomi interrupted. "I've made my choice and I'm at peace with it. I hope you can respect that, but if you cannot, I understand." The women left in a flutter of disapproval, but Naomi stood firm. Quinn pulled her into his arms as soon as they were gone. "That was hard. I'm sorry you had to endure it. It was necessary. Now everyone knows where we stand and they can either accept it or not." Naomi looked up at him. "I meant what I said. I'm at peace with this choice. More than that, I'm happy. For the first time since Daniel died, I feel like I have something to look forward to." The weeks before the wedding passed in a flurry of activity. Naomi packed up her cabin, deciding to rent it to a young couple who were just starting out and needed affordable housing. Quinn finalized the purchase of the ranch and began making plans for the improvements they would need. They spent as much time together as propriety would allow, which wasn't much given the disapproval they faced. But they took long walks in the snow, talking about everything under the sun. Quinn learned that Naomi loved music and had a beautiful singing voice. Naomi discovered that Quinn could draw quite well and often sketched landscapes during quiet moments. "Did you ever think about being an artist?" she asked one afternoon as she looked through his sketchbook. "When I was young, maybe. But that's not a practical way to make a living, especially for someone with no family or connections." Quinn watched her turn the pages. "I just draw for myself, to remember places I've been." "These are wonderful, Quinn. You have real talent." She paused on a sketch of mountains at sunset. "Will you draw our ranch, so we can remember how it looked when we first saw it together?" "I'll draw it as it is now, and then I'll draw it again when we've made it into what we dream it can be," Quinn promised. They were married on December 20th, 1884, in a small ceremony at the Coolidge Church. Naomi's brother came from Denver, still disapproving but willing to give his sister away. Quinn's only attendant was a fellow ranch hand he had worked with years before. The church was half empty, many of the townsfolk choosing to stay away as a sign of their disapproval. But none of that mattered when Quinn saw Naomi walking down the aisle toward him. She wore a simple dress of dark blue wool, her auburn hair pinned up with a few curls framing her face. She carried a small bouquet of pine boughs and dried flowers, and she had never looked more beautiful. The ceremony was brief, the preacher's words perfunctory, but when Quinn slipped the simple gold band onto Naomi's finger and said his vows, he meant every word with his entire being. When Naomi repeated her own vows, her voice was strong and clear, and the love shining in her eyes took Quinn's breath away. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher said. "You may kiss your bride." Quinn cupped Naomi's face in his hands and kissed her softly, tenderly, aware of the few witnesses watching. But for him, the whole world had narrowed to this moment, this woman, this promise of a future together. They spent their wedding night at the hotel in Coolidge, in a room that Quinn had splurged on despite their limited funds. It had a real bed with a feather mattress, clean sheets, and a small stove that kept the room warm. Naomi was nervous, Quinn could tell, and he took his time, making sure she felt safe and cherished. "I was married for 4 years," she said as they lay together afterward, her head on his chest. "But it never felt like this. Is that terrible to say?" "No," Quinn said, running his fingers through her loose hair. "It's honest, and I'm glad I can make you feel this way." "It's more than the physical," Naomi said softly. "Though that was wonderful. It's feeling like I'm with someone who sees me, really sees me. Daniel loved me, but I don't think he ever really knew me. Does that make sense?" "It does." Quinn kissed the top of her head. "I see you, Naomi Xavier, and I love everything I see." They moved to the ranch 2 days after Christmas. The snow was deep and the temperature bitter, but the ranch house was solid and weatherproof. It was larger than Naomi's cabin, with 3 rooms instead of 1, but it needed work. The previous owner had lived alone for the last few years and had let things slide. "It's perfect," Naomi said, standing in the middle of the main room and turning slowly to take it all in. "It's absolutely perfect." Quinn saw the work that needed doing, the chinking that needed replacing, the floorboards that needed repair, the windows that needed new glass. But he also saw what Naomi saw: potential. A home they would build together. January was brutal. Quinn worked from dawn to dusk, repairing the house, caring for the small herd of cattle he had purchased, and trying to keep them all fed and warm. Naomi worked alongside him, never complaining even when the work was hard and the cold was biting. At night, they would collapse into bed exhausted, but they always made time to hold each other and talk about their day. Quinn had never been happier, despite the hardship. He had found his purpose, his place, and most importantly, his person. "You ever regret it?" he asked one night in late January. "Marrying me so quickly, taking on all this work?" "Never," Naomi said firmly. "This is hard, but it's the kind of hard that means something. We're building something, Quinn. Something that's ours." February brought a brief thaw, and they took advantage of it to make improvements. Quinn rebuilt the chicken coop and bought laying hens from a farmer near town. Naomi planted cold, hardy vegetables in the root cellar, where they would sprout early and give them a head start on spring. They also made a trip into Coolidge for supplies. The disapproval they had faced earlier seemed to have softened somewhat. Several people nodded to them on the street, and Mrs. Patterson actually stopped to ask how they were settling in. "We're doing well," Naomi said politely. "The ranch is coming along nicely." "I'm glad to hear it," Mrs. Patterson said, though she still looked somewhat pinched. "I hope you'll both consider attending church on Sunday. The community needs to come together, especially during these difficult winter months." It was as close to an olive branch as they were likely to get, and Naomi accepted graciously. "We'll try to make it, weather permitting." As they drove the wagon back to the ranch, loaded with supplies, Quinn reached over and squeezed Naomi's hand. "That went better than expected. People are starting to see that we're serious about this, about each other, and about making a life here. It's hard to maintain disapproval in the face of obvious happiness." Naomi smiled at him. "And we are happy, aren't we?" "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Quinn confirmed. March brought the first real signs of spring. The snow began to melt in earnest, revealing the land beneath. Quinn and Naomi walked their property boundaries, making plans for the coming growing season. "We could plant oats in that lower field," Quinn said, pointing. "And hay in the upper pastures. We'll need feed for the cattle next winter." "And I want a proper garden near the house," Naomi added. "Big enough to grow vegetables to sell in town as well as for ourselves. We need multiple income streams if we're going to make this work." Quinn loved hearing her use words like "we" and "our." She had fully committed to this life, this dream. She wasn't just his wife, she was his partner in every sense of the word. One evening in late March, as they sat by the fire after supper, Naomi seemed nervous about something. Quinn noticed her starting to speak several times and then stopping. "What is it?" he finally asked. "You can tell me anything." Naomi took a deep breath. "I think I might be pregnant." Quinn's heart seemed to stop and then start again at double speed. "Are you sure?" "Not completely, but fairly certain. I've missed my monthly and I've been feeling sick in the mornings." She looked at him anxiously. "I know we haven't talked about children yet. Is this something you want?" Quinn crossed the room in 2 strides and pulled her into his arms. "Want it? Naomi, it's everything I want. A ranch, a wife I love, and now a child. It's more than I ever dreamed possible." Naomi relaxed against him, and he felt her tears of relief soaking into his shirt. "I was so worried you'd think it was too soon, that we weren't ready." "We'll never feel completely ready," Quinn said, "but we'll figure it out together, just like we've figured everything else out." April arrived with a burst of green as the world came back to life. Quinn worked the fields, preparing them for planting, while Naomi tended her expanding garden. Her pregnancy was confirmed by the doctor in Coolidge, who said the baby would arrive in late October or early November. They also received good news about their cattle. All but 2 had survived the winter, and 3 calves had been born healthy and strong. The ranch was beginning to show real promise. As the weather warmed, neighbors began to stop by, some out of curiosity, others offering genuine help and friendship. Quinn discovered that proving yourself through hard work was the currency that mattered most in ranching country. People could disapprove of the circumstances of their marriage all they wanted, but they couldn't deny that Quinn and Naomi were making a success of their ranch. In May, Naomi's brother visited from Denver. He walked the property with Quinn, asking pointed questions about their finances and plans. By the end of the visit, he seemed satisfied. "I was wrong about you," he admitted to Quinn as he prepared to leave. "I thought you were taking advantage of my sister, but I can see now that you genuinely love her, and she's happier than I've ever seen her." "I do love her," Quinn said simply. "More than anything in this world." June and July were busy with planting and tending crops. The oats came in well, and Naomi's garden flourished under her careful attention. They hired a local boy to help with some of the heavier work, paying him with produce and the promise of a calf when it came time to wean. Naomi's belly grew round with their child, and Quinn found himself constantly amazed by the changes in her body. He would place his hand on her stomach and feel the baby move, overcome with wonder at the life they had created together. "What should we name the baby?" Naomi asked one evening as they sat on the porch watching the sunset. "I don't know. What names do you like?" They spent the next hour discussing possibilities, laughing at some of the suggestions and seriously considering others. Finally, they agreed on 2 names: Robert for a boy, after Quinn's father, and Clara for a girl, after Naomi's mother. August brought the harvest, and they worked from dawn to dusk bringing in the crops. Naomi worked as much as Quinn would allow, though he worried constantly about her overexerting herself. "I'm pregnant, not invalid," she would remind him when he tried to make her rest. Women have been working through pregnancy since the beginning of time. Still, Quinn made sure she took breaks in the shade and drank plenty of water. Their love had deepened over the months, growing from passionate attraction into something more profound. They knew each other's rhythms and moods, could communicate with a glance, and worked together with the ease of long practice. In September, they took their produce to market in Coolidge and were pleased with the prices they received. Naomi's vegetables were particularly prized for their quality, and several shopkeepers asked if she could supply them regularly next year. "We're going to make it," Quinn said as they counted their earnings that night. "Not just survive, but actually thrive." "We already are making it," Naomi said, resting her hand on her swollen belly. "Look at everything we've accomplished since December. A house that's weatherproof and comfortable, fields planted and harvested, livestock healthy and growing. And in another month or so, we'll have our child." October arrived with cooler temperatures and the first hints of autumn color. Naomi was due any day, and Quinn found himself nervous and excited in equal measure. He had attended the births of countless calves and foals, but the idea of his own child being born was entirely different. The baby came on October 28th during a gentle rain. The midwife from Coolidge arrived in time, and Quinn paced the kitchen while Naomi labored in the bedroom. It seemed to take forever, and Quinn was sick with worry by the time he finally heard the baby's first cry. The midwife opened the door, smiling broadly. "You have a son, a big, healthy boy, and your wife did beautifully." Quinn rushed into the room to find Naomi propped up against pillows, exhausted but radiant, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. "Come meet your son," she said softly. Quinn approached almost reverently and looked down at the red, wrinkled face of his child. The baby's eyes were closed, and he had a shock of dark hair. As Quinn watched, the tiny hand escaped the blanket and waved in the air. "He's perfect," Quinn whispered, tears streaming down his face. "You're perfect. Thank you, Naomi. Thank you for this gift." "His name is Robert," Naomi said. "Robert Daniel Xavier." Quinn looked at her in surprise. "Daniel, for my first husband. He was a good man, and I want our son to carry a piece of him forward." Naomi's eyes were serious. "Is that all right with you?" Quinn thought about it and realized it felt right. Daniel had been part of Naomi's life, part of what had shaped her into the woman Quinn loved. Honoring that seemed appropriate. "It's more than all right, it's perfect." November arrived, bringing with it memories of the blizzard that had brought Quinn and Naomi together exactly 1 year before. They talked about it often, marveling at how much their lives had changed in such a short time. "If that storm hadn't hit, if you hadn't found my cabin, we never would have met," Naomi said one evening as she nursed baby Robert by the fire. "I don't believe that," Quinn said. "I think we would have found each other somehow. Some things are just meant to be." Winter set in, but this year they were prepared. The house was tight and warm, their stores were full, and their small family was safe and healthy. Quinn had never imagined he could be this content. He had his land, his home, his wife, and his son. It was everything he had ever wanted and more than he had ever dreamed possible. December brought their first anniversary, and Quinn surprised Naomi with a gift he had been working on in secret. It was a drawing of their ranch, done in careful detail, showing the house and barn and fields as they looked now. But in the corners, he had sketched smaller images of the ranch as it had looked when they arrived, and as he imagined it would look in the future, with more buildings and larger herds. "It's our story," he explained as Naomi examined the drawing with tears in her eyes. "Where we've been and where we're going. I love it," she said. "And I love you. This year has been the best of my life, Quinn. I know that might seem strange given everything we've been through, but it's true. I've never been happier." "Neither have I," Quinn agreed. He pulled her close, careful not to disturb the baby sleeping in her arms. "Here's to many more years together building our life." The winter passed peacefully. Robert was an easy baby, and Naomi recovered quickly from the birth. Quinn spent the cold months making plans for expanding their operations in the spring. They needed more grazing land, and he wanted to build a larger barn. They also discussed hiring permanent help, perhaps a young man looking to learn ranching in exchange for room and board. February brought a surprise visitor. Quinn's sister, Mary, arrived with her husband and 4 children, having made the long journey from Missouri. It was an emotional reunion, and Quinn spent hours catching up with the sister he hadn't seen in 15 years. "You've done well for yourself," Mary said, looking around the ranch with approval. "Ma and Pa would be proud." "I hope so," Quinn said. "It's taken me a long time to get here, but it was worth the wait." Mary pulled him aside at one point and spoke seriously. "That wife of yours is something special, Quinn. The way she looks at you, the way you work together, that's real love, the kind that lasts. I know, I'm a lucky man." "Not luck," Mary corrected. "Blessing. You've both been blessed to find each other." When March arrived and the snow began to melt, Quinn and Naomi stood on their porch watching Robert take his first shaky steps. The baby was already growing so fast, changing every day. "By this time next year, he'll be running all over the place," Naomi said, laughing as Robert tottered forward and fell onto his bottom. "And maybe he'll have a brother or sister by then," Quinn said hopefully. Naomi turned to look at him, a smile playing at her lips. "Maybe he will." "I've been thinking it's time for Robert to have a sibling." April brought new life to the ranch. The cattle herd had grown, and Quinn was able to purchase more land from a neighboring rancher who was downsizing. Their vegetable garden expanded, and Naomi began preserving food for sale as well as for their own use. They also hired help. A young man named Thomas, 18 years old and eager to learn ranching, moved into the small bunkhouse Quinn had built over the winter. Thomas proved to be a hard worker and a quick learner, and Quinn enjoyed teaching him the trade. May was spent planting, and by June the ranch was thriving. Their first anniversary of arriving at the ranch came and went, marked by a quiet dinner and reflections on how far they had come. Quinn looked around at everything they had built and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The summer passed in a pleasant rhythm of work and family time. Robert grew into a curious, active toddler who loved following Quinn around the ranch. Naomi taught him words and songs, and he brought constant joy and laughter into their lives. In August, Naomi confirmed what Quinn had suspected for a while. She was pregnant again, due in early spring. Quinn was thrilled, though he worried about Naomi managing two small children while helping run the ranch. "We'll figure it out," Naomi assured him. "Other women have done it before us, and we'll do it too. Besides, Thomas is working out well. Maybe we can hire additional help when the time comes." September brought the harvest, even larger than the year before. They were able to sell enough to put a substantial amount into savings, building their financial security. Quinn looked at the future with confidence and optimism. One evening in late September, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Naomi rested her head on Quinn's shoulder. "Do you ever think about that blizzard? About how different our lives would be if it hadn't happened?" "Sometimes," Quinn admitted. "But I prefer to think about how lucky we were that it did happen. That storm brought me to you, and you've given me everything I could ever want." "We've given each other everything," Naomi corrected. "That's what makes this work. We're partners, equal in all things." Quinn kissed her hair, breathing in the familiar scent of her. "You're right. We're partners. In ranching, in parenting, in life." The baby arrived in April, a healthy girl they named Clara Margaret Xavier. She had Naomi's red hair and Quinn's blue eyes, and she completed their family perfectly. Robert, now 18 months old, was fascinated by his baby sister and wanted to help with everything. That spring, as Quinn worked the fields and watched his family grow, he often thought about the journey that had brought him here. From an orphaned boy with nothing to his name, to a man with a thriving ranch, a wife he loved beyond measure, and two beautiful children. It had taken nearly 30 years, but he had finally found his place in the world. Summer arrived with its usual work and heat, but Quinn welcomed it. He loved the rhythm of ranch life, the satisfaction of physical labor, the pride of seeing crops and animals thrive under his care. But most of all, he loved coming home each evening to Naomi and their children, to the life they had built together. One evening in July, as they sat on the porch after the children were in bed, Quinn pulled Naomi close. "Do you remember what you said that first night in your cabin, about love being just comfortable and safe?" "I remember," Naomi said. "Were you wrong, do you think? Or were you just describing a different kind of love?" Naomi was quiet for a moment, considering. "I think I was describing the only kind of love I knew at the time. What Daniel and I had was real, but it was limited by what we brought to it. What you and I have is different because we bring our whole selves to each other. Does that make sense?" "It does. And I'm grateful for every day we have together." Quinn kissed her softly. "I love you, Naomi, more now than even when we married, if that's possible." "It's possible," she assured him, "because I feel the same way. Every day I discover something new to love about you, some way we fit together even better than before." As the summer progressed into fall, they celebrated Robert's second birthday with a small party. Several neighboring families attended, including the couple who were renting Naomi's old cabin. The community had fully accepted Quinn and Naomi now, impressed by their success and the obvious strength of their marriage. Mrs. Patterson even took Naomi aside to offer a quiet apology. "I was wrong to judge you so harshly when you married Quinn. I can see now that you made the right choice, unconventional though it may have been." "Thank you," Naomi said graciously. "I appreciate you saying so." October arrived, bringing with it the 2-year anniversary of Robert's birth and memories of that first terrifying winter. Quinn and Naomi stood together looking at the ranch, so different now from what it had been when they started. "We did this," Quinn said, his arm around Naomi's waist. "Together." "We did," Naomi agreed, "and we're just beginning. There's so much more we can do, so much more we can build." November came, marking 2 years since the blizzard that had changed both their lives forever. Quinn woke early that morning and lay in bed, listening to the soft breathing of his sleeping wife and the small sounds from the children's room. He thought about that desperate man struggling through the snow, half frozen and alone. That man would never have believed that 2 years later he would be lying in his own bed in his own home, surrounded by a family he loved. They celebrated their second wedding anniversary in December with a renewed sense of joy and gratitude. Quinn gave Naomi a locket with pictures of their children, and she gave him a new saddle she had been saving for months to buy. "To many more years together," Quinn said, raising his glass of cider. "To building our life," Naomi responded, clinking her glass against his. Winter settled in, but the ranch was well prepared. They had plenty of supplies, the animals were sheltered and fed, and the house was warm and cozy. On the coldest nights, Quinn would build up the fire and they would all gather in the main room. Naomi would sing while Quinn played with the children, and those moments of simple domestic happiness felt more precious than gold. As the new year began, Quinn took stock of their situation. The ranch was profitable and growing. They had a small but reliable income from their crops and livestock. They had hired 2 more workers, young men like Thomas who wanted to learn the ranching trade. Their family was healthy and happy. They had become respected members of the Coolidge community. But more than any material success, Quinn treasured the love he shared with Naomi. Their relationship had only deepened over the years, growing stronger with each challenge they faced together. They still talked for hours, still surprised each other with small gestures of affection, still made time for romance, despite the demands of ranching and parenting. One February evening, as they prepared for bed, Naomi turned to Quinn with a thoughtful expression. "Do you think we should expand the ranch house?" Add more rooms, planning for more children already, Quinn asked, grinning. Maybe, Naomi said, returning his smile. Or maybe I just want space for your sister to visit again. She wrote that she might come this summer with her whole family. That would be wonderful. I'd love for our children to know their cousins. Quinn pulled Naomi into his arms. And yes, we should expand the house. We can afford it now, and it makes sense to plan for growth. March arrived with its promise of spring, and Quinn began planning the expansion of the house. He wanted to add 2 more bedrooms and a larger kitchen, giving them more space to grow. The work would take most of the summer, but it would be worth it. As the snow melted and the land came back to life, Quinn and Naomi walked their property as they had done every spring. Robert ran ahead of them, investigating everything with boundless energy, while Naomi carried Clara on her hip. I want to plant fruit trees, Naomi said, pointing to a spot near the house. Apples and pears. They'll take years to produce, but they'll be here for our children and maybe even our grandchildren. Quinn loved the way she thought about the future, about leaving a legacy. That's a perfect idea. We'll plant them next week. As spring progressed into summer, work on the house expansion began. Quinn and his hired hands worked on the construction while Naomi managed the rest of the ranch operations. It was a busy, hectic time, but it was also exciting to see their home growing. Mary arrived in July with her family, and the ranch was filled with the sounds of children playing and adults laughing. Quinn's nephews and nieces got along well with Robert and Clara, and it did Quinn's heart good to see his family together. "You've built something really special here," Mary told him one evening as they watched the children play. "Not just the ranch, but the family, the life. This is everything Ma and Pa would have wanted for you. I know. Sometimes I can hardly believe it's real." Quinn watched Naomi across the yard, laughing at something one of Mary's daughters had said. "I was so lost for so long, Mary, just drifting from place to place with no real purpose. And then that storm hit and I found Naomi, and suddenly everything made sense." "That's what love does," Mary said wisely. "It gives us purpose and direction. It makes us want to be better, to build something lasting." By the time Mary and her family left in August, the house expansion was nearly complete. The new rooms were framed and roofed, and Quinn was confident they would be finished before winter. He was already planning the next improvements for the ranch, always thinking ahead, always building toward the future. The harvest that fall was the best yet. Their fields produced abundantly, and the cattle herd had grown large enough that Quinn was able to sell several head at a substantial profit. They were truly prospering now, their success built on hard work and partnership. In late October, as they celebrated Robert's 3rd birthday, Quinn looked around at their home filled with friends and neighbors and felt overwhelming gratitude. 3 years ago, he had been struggling through a blizzard, desperate and alone. Now he had everything a man could want. That night, after the guests had left and the children were in bed, Quinn and Naomi sat by the fire in their expanded main room. The new space felt good, comfortable, and welcoming. "We should have another baby," Naomi said suddenly. Quinn looked at her in surprise. "Really? You want another child?" "I do. I think our family isn't quite complete yet. One more would make it perfect." She smiled at him. "What do you think?" "I think you're amazing, and I'm happy to have as many children as you want," Quinn said, pulling her close. "Our home is big enough now, and the ranch is doing well." Why not? November arrived, bringing with it the 3rd anniversary of that fateful blizzard. Quinn and Naomi had made it a tradition to spend part of that day reflecting on how far they had come. They would look at Quinn's drawing of the ranch, comparing the reality to his projections, and talk about their plans for the future. "We've exceeded even my most optimistic expectations," Quinn said, studying the drawing. The ranch is doing better than I dared to hope. That's because we work well together, Naomi said. We balance each other. Your ambition and my practicality, your vision and my attention to detail. We make a good team. The best team, Quinn agreed. December brought their third anniversary, celebrated with a dinner in town at the hotel where they had spent their wedding night. Mrs. Patterson had organized it as a way of showing the community's full acceptance of their marriage. Many people attended, and Quinn was touched by the warmth and genuine affection shown to him and Naomi. 3 years ago, people thought we were making a terrible mistake, Naomi said as they danced together. Now look at us. They were wrong and we were right, Quinn said simply. We knew what we felt, and we had the courage to act on it. As winter settled in and the year came to a close, Quinn found himself taking stock of his life. He was 32 years old, married to the woman he loved, father to 2 beautiful children with hopefully more on the way, owner of a successful ranch. He had achieved everything he had worked toward for so many years. But more than the material success, he had found something he hadn't even known he was looking for. He had found home, not just a place but a feeling. A sense of belonging, of being exactly where he was meant to be with exactly who he was meant to be with. On New Year's Eve, as they stood on their porch watching the stars, Naomi confirmed that she was pregnant again. The baby would arrive in August, right in the middle of harvest season, but they would manage somehow. They always did. This is going to be a good year, Naomi said, leaning against Quinn. I can feel it. Every year with you is a good year, Quinn replied, kissing her temple. But yes, I think this one will be special, and it was. Spring brought new calves and lambs, and Naomi's fruit trees budded for the first time. Summer brought Mary and her family for another visit, and the expansion of their herds. The baby, another boy they named William after Naomi's father, arrived healthy and strong in late August. As fall arrived and they brought in another abundant harvest, Quinn realized that they had truly built something lasting. The ranch was established and successful. Their children were healthy and happy. Their marriage was strong and loving. They had weathered storms, both literal and figurative, and had come through stronger for it. One evening in October, as they sat on the porch watching Robert and Clara play while baby William slept in Naomi's arms, Quinn said, "Do you remember asking me if this is what love feels like? Back in your cabin during that first snowstorm." "I remember," Naomi said. "I think I'm finally able to answer you. Yes, this is what love feels like. Not just the passion and excitement, though that's there too. But this sense of building something together, of facing challenges as a team, of creating a life that's bigger than either of us alone. That's love." "You're right," Naomi said, smiling at him. "And it's better than I ever imagined it could be." As the years continued to pass, Quinn and Naomi's ranch grew and prospered. They added more land, more buildings, more livestock. Their children grew strong and capable, learning the ranching trade from their parents. Robert showed a talent for working with animals, while Clara had inherited her mother's green thumb and loved the garden. William was still too young to show his inclinations, but he was curious and bright. They faced challenges, of course. There were droughts and storms, market downturns and difficult winters. But they weathered each challenge together, their partnership growing stronger with each trial. Quinn never forgot that first desperate night when he had stumbled to Naomi's door, or the 3 days they had spent snowbound together, falling in love without even realizing it. By their 5th anniversary, the ranch was one of the most successful in the region. They employed several full-time workers and had become important members of the Coolidge community. Quinn served on the town council, and Naomi was active in the church and the women's auxiliary that had once disapproved of her so strongly. but all the success meant nothing compared to what they had built as a family. On quiet evenings, when the children were in bed and the work was done, Quinn and Naomi would sit together and talk, still finding new things to discover about each other, still deepening their connection. "Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if that blizzard hadn't hit," Naomi said one evening. "If you hadn't found my cabin that day." "I've thought about that too," Quinn admitted. "I probably would have bought the Thompson Ranch and worked it alone, made a decent life for myself maybe. But I wouldn't have been happy, not truly. I wouldn't have known what I was missing. And I would have stayed in my cabin, living half a life, never knowing that love could feel like this." Naomi took Quinn's hand. "That storm was the best thing that ever happened to me because it brought me you." "We were both lost in our own ways," Quinn said. "You in your grief and loneliness, me in my rootless ambition. That storm brought us together and gave us both a reason to be found." As the 6th year began, Naomi announced that she was pregnant for the 4th time. This pregnancy was harder than the previous ones, and Quinn worried constantly. But Naomi was strong and determined, and in May, she gave birth to twin girls. They named them Rose and Ruth, and with their arrival, Quinn and Naomi agreed their family was complete. The ranch house, expanded again to accommodate their growing family, was always full of noise and life. Quinn loved coming in from the fields to find his children playing, his wife singing as she worked, his home filled with warmth and love. This was what he had been working toward his whole life without knowing it. Years continued to pass in a steady rhythm of work and growth. The children grew and learned, each developing their own personalities and talents. Robert, at 8, was already an accomplished horseman. Clara, at 6, could identify every plant in the garden and knew which herbs cured which ailments. William, at 4, showed an aptitude for numbers and liked to help Quinn with the ranch accounts. The twins, at 2, were still discovering the world but already showing signs of strong personalities. Quinn and Naomi's partnership only deepened with time. They had learned each other's strengths and weaknesses, learned when to push and when to support, learned how to communicate without words. Their love had matured from the passionate intensity of those early days into something deeper and more enduring, like a tree with roots that ran deep into solid ground. On their 10th anniversary, Quinn took Naomi away from the ranch for 3 days, leaving the children with Mary and her family who had come to visit. They rode into the mountains, to the spot where Quinn had been caught in the blizzard all those years ago. "I was so scared that day," Quinn said, looking out over the landscape, "so sure I was going to die out here alone. But you didn't die. You found me," Naomi said, slipping her hand into his, "and we found each other." "Best thing that ever happened to me," Quinn said, pulling her close. "Every good thing in my life stems from that day, from that storm, from finding your cabin." They stood together in silence for a while, remembering and reflecting. Then they rode to where Naomi's cabin still stood, rented now to a young family much like they had once been. "It looks smaller than I remember," Naomi said, laughing. "Everything does when you're looking back," Quinn replied. "But it was exactly the right size for what we needed then. A place to shelter, to find each other, to start building our life." That night, camping under the stars, they made love with the passion of newlyweds but the comfort of long familiarity. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Quinn said, "You know what I've realized over these 10 years? "What's that?" "Love isn't something that happens to you, like getting caught in a storm. It's something you build day by day, choice by choice. That moment when I knocked on your door, when you let me in despite your fear and uncertainty, that was just the beginning. Every day since then, we've chosen to love each other, to build this life together. That's what makes it lasting." "You're right," Naomi said, kissing him softly. And I choose you, Quinn Xavier, today, tomorrow, and every day after that for as long as we both shall live." They returned to the ranch renewed and refreshed, ready to face whatever challenges the future might bring. And there were challenges. A drought in their 12th year that tested their resources and ingenuity. A harsh winter in their 14th year that claimed some of their livestock. Robert breaking his arm falling from a horse. Clara's bout with influenza that had them worried for weeks. But through it all, Quinn and Naomi faced each challenge together, their partnership unshakable. They had built something strong and true, something that could weather any storm. By their 15th anniversary, their children were growing into capable young people. Robert, at 13, was working the ranch alongside Quinn and talking about the future. Clara, at 11, was already helping other families with medicinal herbs and talking about maybe becoming a nurse someday. William, at 9, kept meticulous records of the ranch's finances and predicted market trends with surprising accuracy. The twins, at 7, were inseparable and already showing talent for training horses. Quinn looked at his family gathered around the dinner table one evening and felt such overwhelming love and gratitude that it brought tears to his eyes. Naomi caught his expression and smiled, understanding without words. They had done this, built this, created this life together. From a desperate cowboy caught in a blizzard and a grieving widow living alone, they had become a family, a force, a legacy. That spring, Quinn finally completed the drawing he had started so many years ago. It showed the ranch in 3 stages, as it had been when they arrived, as it was now, and as he imagined it would be when their children took it over someday. He framed it and hung it in the main room, a reminder of how far they had come and how far they still could go. "It's beautiful," Naomi said, studying the drawing. "You captured everything perfectly." "It's our story," Quinn said, putting his arm around her waist. "Where we've been and where we're going." As summer arrived and the ranch buzzed with activity, Quinn often found himself pausing in his work to simply observe and appreciate. The fields green with growing crops, the cattle grazing peacefully, the children laughing as they played, Naomi singing as she worked in her garden. This was his life, the life he had built with the woman he loved, and it was more than he had ever dared to dream. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching another spectacular sunset, Naomi said, "We've been blessed, Quinn. Beyond what either of us deserved or expected." "We've worked hard," Quinn corrected gently. "We've made good choices and supported each other through difficult times. That's not just blessing, that's partnership." "Both can be true," Naomi said. "We've worked hard, yes. But we were also blessed to find each other when we did, to have the courage to take a chance on love despite how crazy it seemed." Quinn couldn't argue with that. He thought about that younger version of himself, riding through the mountains in search of his dream. That man had been so focused on owning land, on achieving independence, on building material success. He hadn't realized that what he really needed was connection, partnership, love. The storm had forced him to find shelter, but it was Naomi who had given him a home. Fall arrived with its usual rhythm of harvest and preparation for winter. But this year felt different somehow, fuller. Quinn realized it was because they were no longer just surviving or even just succeeding. They were thriving, truly thriving in all the ways that mattered. On the anniversary of that first blizzard, 16 years after Quinn had stumbled to Naomi's door, they gathered the whole family together. Quinn told the story of that desperate ride through the storm, of finding the cabin just when hope was fading, of 3 days snowbound that had changed both their lives forever. The children listened, fascinated. They had heard parts of the story before, but never all the details. never the full truth of how unlikely their parents' meeting and marriage had been. "So you fell in love in just 3 days?" Clara asked, her romantic heart captured by the story. "We started falling in love in 3 days," Naomi corrected. "But real love, lasting love, is built over time through choices and commitment. What we felt then was just the beginning." "But how did you know?" Robert asked. "How did you know it was real and not just the situation forcing you together?" Quinn and Naomi looked at each other, and Quinn saw his whole life reflected in her green eyes. "We didn't know for certain," he admitted. "We took a leap of faith. But sometimes you have to trust what you feel, even when it seems impossible." "And sometimes," Naomi added, "the impossible turns out to be the most true thing in your life." That night, after the children were in bed, Quinn and Naomi stood together on their porch looking out at the ranch they had built together. The moon was full, casting silver light over everything, making the familiar landscape look magical and new. 16 years, Quinn said. "More than half my life now. The best half," Naomi said, leaning against him. "The half that matters. All of it matters. The hard years made me who I needed to be to build this life with you." Quinn turned her to face him. "I love you, Naomi, more today than yesterday, more this year than last. My love for you just keeps growing." "And mine for you," Naomi said, reaching up to touch his face. "You're everything I needed without knowing I needed it. My partner, my love, my home." They kissed under the moonlight, and Quinn felt the same spark he had felt 16 years ago when he first kissed her in her cabin. Time had deepened their connection, matured their love, but it hadn't diminished the passion or the joy of being together. As winter arrived and the year came to a close, Quinn reflected on how fully his life had turned out. He was 45 years old now, successful in business, blessed in family, and deeply in love with his wife. The desperate cowboy caught in a blizzard was long gone, transformed by love and partnership into a man of substance and purpose. But he never forgot where he came from or how close he had come to missing all of this. Sometimes, on snowy days, he would stand at the window and remember that desperate ride through the storm. And he would whisper a prayer of gratitude for the blizzard that had brought him to Naomi's door, for the widow who had taken him in despite her own fears and grief, for the 3 days snowbound that had given them both a chance at real happiness. By springtime, they were building more than just a life together. They were building a legacy, something that would outlast them and carry forward into the future. Their children were growing into good people, learning the values of hard work, honesty, and love. The ranch was prosperous and sustainable, a solid foundation for future generations. But more than any of that, Quinn and Naomi had built a love story, the kind that reminded people that taking chances and following your heart sometimes led to the greatest rewards. They had proven that sometimes the most unlikely circumstances could lead to the most beautiful outcomes. Years continued to pass, bringing new joys and new challenges. Robert married a local girl and brought her to live on the ranch, building his own small house on the property. Clara went to nursing school in Denver, but came home every chance she got. William showed such aptitude for business that Quinn knew he would expand the ranch's operations beyond anything Quinn had imagined. The twins discovered a talent for breeding horses and began building their own enterprise alongside the main ranch operations. Through it all, Quinn and Naomi remained the heart of it all, their love the foundation on which everything else was built. They grew older together, silver threading through their hair, lines appearing on their faces, but their connection only deepened. They had truly built a life together, brick by brick, choice by choice, year by year. On their 25th anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. Children, Grandchildren, friends, and neighbors all came to honor Quinn and Naomi and the life they had built. Quinn gave a speech, thanking Naomi for taking a chance on a half-frozen cowboy all those years ago. "I didn't have much to offer back then," he said, holding Naomi's hand as he spoke to the assembled crowd. "No ranch, no home, just a dream and a lot of determination. But Naomi saw something in me worth believing in. She took a chance on love when it seemed too soon, too fast, too impractical. And look what we built together." He gestured to the ranch spread out around them, to their children and grandchildren, to the life they had created. "This is what love does when you give it a chance. It grows, it builds, it creates something beautiful and lasting. I'm grateful every day for that blizzard that brought me to Naomi's door, but I'm even more grateful for every day since then that she's chosen to walk beside me." There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd when he finished. Naomi stood and kissed him, and everyone cheered. Then she spoke, her voice clear and strong. "Quinn says I took a chance on him, but the truth is we took a chance on each other. We were both lost in our own ways, and we found each other when we most needed finding. He gave me a reason to live fully again, to open my heart to love and possibility. Everything good in my life comes from that choice we made, from that leap of faith we took together." She looked out at their family, at the ranch, at the life they had built. "This is what's possible when you choose love over fear, when you choose partnership over safety, when you choose to build rather than just survive. Quinn and I built this together, and it's been the greatest joy of my life." The celebration continued into the night, with music and dancing and stories shared. Quinn and Naomi danced together as they had on their wedding day, and Quinn marveled at how right she still felt in his arms. 25 years, and he loved her more than ever. As the evening wound down and guests began to leave, Robert approached his parents. He had an announcement to make. His wife was pregnant with their third child, and they wanted to name the baby Quinn or Naomi, depending on whether it was a boy or girl. Quinn felt tears spring to his eyes. "You don't have to do that." "We want to," Robert said firmly. "You and Ma have given us everything. You've built a legacy worth honoring, and we want our children to carry your names forward." Later, as Quinn and Naomi prepared for bed, they talked about the evening and what Robert had said. "A legacy," Quinn mused. "I never thought about it that way. I was just trying to build a good life for us." "That's what a legacy is," Naomi said. "Not something you set out to create, but something that grows naturally from living a good life, making good choices, loving fully." "We've done that, Quinn. We've built something that will last long after we're gone." "We've built it together," Quinn emphasized. "Every step of the way we've been partners. That's the real legacy, I think. Not just the ranch or the success, but showing our children what real partnership looks like." They lay in bed that night, holding each other in the darkness, and Quinn thought about how far they had come. From that snowbound cabin to this large ranch house filled with family and love. From two wounded souls taking a desperate chance to a partnership that had weathered every storm and emerged stronger. "I love you," he whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Naomi whispered back. "Today, tomorrow, and forever." As Quinn drifted off to sleep, he thought about that younger version of himself fighting through the blizzard, searching desperately for shelter. That man had been looking for a place to wait out a storm. He had found so much more. He had found home, love, purpose, and partnership. He had found everything that mattered. The blizzard had brought them together, but love had built their life. And it was a beautiful life indeed, full of laughter and hard work, challenges and triumphs, always with Naomi by his side. That was the real miracle, not the lucky chance that had brought him to her door, but the choice they had made to build something lasting from that chance encounter. Years continued to unfold with their steady rhythm. Quinn and Naomi grew old together gracefully, still partners in all things, still deeply in love. They watched their children build their own lives and families, watched their grandchildren grow, and eventually welcomed great-grandchildren. The ranch continued to prosper under Robert's management, with William handling the business side and the twins expanding the horse breeding operation. Clara returned home after years of nursing in Denver and opened a small clinic in Coolidge, serving the community and teaching the next generation about healing. Quinn and Naomi, now in their 70s, spent their days quietly on the ranch they had built. They took walks together in the morning, tended Naomi's gardens, and spent evenings on the porch watching the sun set over their land. They had earned their rest, but they were still vital and engaged, still offering wisdom and guidance to their children and grandchildren. One evening, as they sat in their favorite spot on the porch, Naomi said, "If you could go back and do it all again, would you change anything?" Quinn thought about the question seriously. "Maybe I'd have knocked on your door a day earlier," he said with a smile. "But no, I wouldn't change anything important. Every choice we made, every challenge we faced led us to this moment. And this moment is pretty perfect." "Even the hard times?" Naomi asked. "Especially the hard times. They taught us what we were capable of together." Quinn took her hand, feeling the familiar warmth. "We built something real, Naomi, something that mattered. Not everyone can say that." As the sun set in brilliant colors across the sky, painting the mountains gold and pink, Quinn reflected on the truth of his words. They had built something real and lasting, a testament to what was possible when two people committed fully to each other, and to building a life together. The story of the cowboy and the widow, brought together by a blizzard and bound together by choice, became a legend in the family. Grandchildren and great-grandchildren asked to hear it told over and over, never tiring of the romantic tale of impossible love that had created the family they all belonged to. And Quinn and Naomi, sitting together in the twilight of their lives, held hands and remembered. Remembered the storm, the fear, the desperate hope. Remembered 3 days snowbound in a cabin that became the foundation of everything. Remembered the choice they had made to take a chance on love despite every practical reason not to. But most of all, they remembered the life they had built together, day by day, year by year. A life of partnership and purpose, of challenges met and overcome, of children raised and love deepened. A life that had started with a blizzard and grown into something beautiful and lasting. As stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Quinn pulled Naomi close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For opening the door that day. For taking a chance on a half-frozen stranger. For building this life with me. For everything." Naomi smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for getting caught in that storm. Thank you for finding my cabin. Thank you for seeing me, really seeing me and loving what you saw. Thank you for every day since then." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the night deepen around them. Somewhere in the house, they could hear their family laughing, their legacy living and growing. The ranch stretched out around them, solid and prosperous, a testament to decades of hard work and partnership. The blizzard that had brought them together was long past, faded into memory and story. But what they had built from that chance encounter remained strong and true. A love story that had transformed two lives and created something larger than either of them alone could have imagined. From a snowbound cabin to a thriving ranch, from strangers to soulmates, from winter to spring and through all the seasons that followed, they had built a life together. And it was a good life, a full life, a life worth living and worth remembering. As Quinn held Naomi close under the starlight, He knew with absolute certainty that every moment of struggle had been worth it to arrive at this place of peace and contentment. Every risk had been rewarded, every leap of faith justified. The cowboy caught in a blizzard had found more than shelter that desperate night. He had found home, love, and purpose, and the widow who had opened her door to a stranger had found more than company through a storm. She had found partnership, passion, and a love that grew stronger with each passing year. Together, they had proven that sometimes the most unlikely circumstances lead to the most beautiful outcomes. That taking a chance on love, even when it seems too soon or too fast or too impractical, can lead to a lifetime of happiness. That what matters most is not how you begin, but what you build together along the way. As the years had turned to decades, and their hair had silvered, and their hands had weathered with age, one truth remained constant and unchanging. They loved each other more with each passing day. The passionate intensity of those early days had matured into something deeper and richer, a love that was woven into every aspect of their lives. Their story became the foundation on which generations would build their own lives and loves. The ranch they had created together would continue for generations, but more importantly, the example they had set of true partnership and enduring love would inspire their descendants to seek the same in their own relationships. Quinn and Naomi lived to celebrate their 50th anniversary, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The celebration was grand, with people coming from all over to honor the couple who had built not just a successful ranch, but a true legacy of love. Standing before the assembled crowd, Quinn said simply, "50 years ago, I was caught in a blizzard. I thought I was searching for shelter, but I found so much more. I found my purpose, my home, and my heart. Everything good in my life stems from the moment Naomi opened her door to me. We've built this life together, and I'm grateful for every moment of it." Naomi, her eyes bright with tears and joy, added, "They say lightning doesn't strike twice, that true love is rare. But I've been blessed to know it, to live it, to build a life around it. Quinn gave me a reason to live fully again, and together we've created something beautiful. This is what love looks like when you nurture it, when you choose it every day, when you build it brick by brick into something lasting." That night, after everyone had gone home and the ranch was quiet, Quinn and Naomi sat once more on their porch, looking out at the land they had transformed together. The moon was full, just as it had been so many nights over the past 50 years, casting its silver light over everything they had built. "We did it," Quinn said softly. "We really did it." "We did," Naomi agreed, her hand warm in his, "and I'd do it all again in a heartbeat." Even the hard parts, especially the hard parts, they made the good parts that much sweeter. She looked at him, her face lined with age but her eyes still bright with love. "You're my greatest adventure, Quinn Xavier. Every day with you has been a gift." Quinn pulled her close, feeling the steady beat of her heart against his. "And you're my everything, Naomi Xavier. My partner, my love, my home. You took a frozen cowboy into your cabin during a storm, and you've been warming my heart ever since." They sat together under the stars, two souls who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful from that chance encounter. The blizzard that brought them together had passed long ago, but the warmth they had created together would endure for generations. This was their legacy. Not just the land or the buildings or even the family they had raised, but the proof that love, real and true and lasting love, was possible. That taking a chance on something that felt right, even when the world said it was too soon or too fast, could lead to a lifetime of happiness. That partnership and commitment and choosing each other every single day was what made love last. As they finally rose to go inside for the night, Quinn took one last look at the ranch spread out in the moonlight. From a desperate ride through a blizzard to this moment of perfect contentment, it had been quite a journey. But every step had been worth it, every challenge overcome, every sacrifice made, because in the end, what mattered most was simple. They had loved each other well. They had built a life together that was full of purpose and meaning. They had created a family and a legacy that would continue long after they were gone. The Snowbound cabin had held a cowboy and a widow for 3 desperate days during a blizzard. But by springtime and through all the years that followed, they had built a life together that was rich with love, strong with partnership, and lasting in its impact. And that, Quinn thought as he followed Naomi inside, was the truest happy ending anyone could ask for.